Hello, it's Michael Watts, and welcome to Guitar.com Live. My guest for this session was described by none other than Steve Vai as the future of exceptional guitar playing. I'm talking, of course, of the mighty Plini, who joins me now live from Sydney, Australia. Thank you very much for joining us live from Sydney in the evening for you. There's a lot that I'd like to talk to you about, but first of all, I just wanted to say how happy we are that you agreed to be part of Guitar.com Live. I know that you've got a huge amount of fans across our readership, of course, myself included, and it really is a pleasure to talk with you today. One of the first things that I wanted to find out more about, Pliny, was how this whole thing started, because listening to your music, there is I think you'd admit there's a lot going on.
I think it probably started with the Beatles when I was really, really young. They were like the first band that I was a huge fan of, and for some reason Ringo made me want to play drums, which is probably not something that happens to most people who hear Ringo play drums. So I convinced my parents to let me get a drum kit when I was 6 or 7 or something like that, but I only could play for a couple of years because it was just too loud for living in an apartment. And then we had a ukulele in the house that I played until it was literally broken. And that was replaced by my first guitar. Right. And at the time I was listening to like everything that a 10-year-old would listen to, like Blink-182 and Green Day and all that. And I guess at some point I just enjoyed guitar enough to start researching what people were actually doing with guitars. And this was, I think, just pre-YouTube. So I went and bought Guitar World and Metal Hammer and started finding bands like that. And I mean, obviously all the people that were on the cover and inside of Guitar World were like Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, John Petrucci, Dream Theater, all that sort of stuff. So that was kind of where I started with like the guitar is something that you can do crazy shit with. And then that kind of just kept expanding from there, from like Dream Theater to Opeth and stuff like Planet X, Meshuggah, Dillinger Escape Plan, sort of just like more into the prog world, more into the metal world. Yeah, that's kind of the story.
Fantastic. I wanted to ask you about influences from earlier on, because when I first heard your work, which is going back about 3 or 4 years, and I may be showing my age now, but I was like, this is like Holdsworth meets Tom Morello with a bit of Zappa, a bit of Mahavishnu Orchestra in. Had any of that come through directly, or was that a sort of a secondary influence from people that you listened to already?
More of a secondary influence. I only started getting into Holdsworth in the last few years, and still in a way where I'm like, I don't know what the fuck is happening here. But I guess I kind of see my listening to Holdsworth the same as my visiting an art gallery. Like I know absolutely nothing about what I'm looking at or listening to, but I can pick out things that seem pretty to me and then try and copy them. And the rest, yeah, not really. All the stuff that people like you would tell me that they might hear in my music is all the stuff that I'm now going to write down and then check out because I never did. But I guess one big one that I heard a lot when I was young with my parents was Pat Metheny, and then never really actively listened to him again until recently. And I think that's probably come through a bit.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Certainly in the phrasing, but also in the tone. You have a very fat, precise timbre, which I would associate with Metheny. It's interesting what you say about an art gallery. I would say that people listening to your music for the first time have a similar sort of reaction, because there is so much going on, and so it's like the first time I listened to some of your work, it's slightly overwhelming, and then you learn to pick up little bits, and then maybe on the third or fourth listening, the whole thing sort of comes together. How do you recommend that people approach that kind of listening experience?
I don't know, but that's really cool to hear because I guess I'm so trapped in actually making it that I lose total concept of what it sounds like for a first time or what
Mm.
the song even was in the first place. Um, oh man, I kind of wish I could be you because I'm sure I would learn so much about writing music better if I could listen to my own music without being myself.
Oh, I think that's a hypercritical artistic kind of statement. I know exactly where you're coming from. Um, when it comes to, okay, let's go there. You said the music that you create, how different is that, do you think, from the music that you initially hear, that you initially feel? Is there a disparity between the inner voice and the final, for want of a better word, product?
Um, Not necessarily. I think the finished product is only kind of exists because it is the proper representation of the original idea.
Mm.
But when I'm fumbling around with an idea in the first place, to me it sounds horrible. Like it's kind of like staring into an abyss and you see a tiny bit
Mm.
of light and you just pursue the light based on the hope that when you get there it's good. And so that's how a song kind of emerges
Mm.
for me. Like none of the there's really not much magic or complexity in where it starts. Like it could be D major chord or something like that. But then all the piling different things on top of it to the point where maybe that original D major chord's no longer there, but the stuff that's
Mm.
replaced it. I don't know if that even makes sense, but I guess
No, it does.
that's how I guess it gets to a place where you had to listen to it a couple of times to like figure out what was happening. Is because I guess the thing that was originally happening isn't there
Mm.
anymore. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. I know you're not that much of a gearhead from interviews that you've done in the past. However, obviously we have an interested audience who will be hanging upon your every word when it comes to your choice of instrument, your choice of strings, pickups, the whole gamut. Now, as I understand it, before your now long-standing relationship with Strandberg guitars, you were playing Ibanez for many years.
Yep. And again, that was like you open a guitar magazine and you look at what people are playing, and it's Ibanez.
Right.
That's yeah. I had that guitar. I mean, I still have it. I played it for 10 years or something. Just that one guitar. So I guess I am weird because I spent all that time being obsessed with guitar without buying other ones.
That is, yeah, that is unusual.
Yeah.
And then the clouds parted. One day the Strandberg entered your life. This extraordinary design. How did that happen?
Um, Through the internet, I guess that Ibanez was slowly starting to deteriorate in my hands, and so I thought maybe it's time to get a new guitar. And I was looking at the John Petrucci signature guitars,
Mm,
looking at Parker and I think PRS.
Parker, yes.
Yeah, I think Parker Fly.
I
Um,
had one of those.
did you like it?
It had the best neck I've ever played on any electric guitar. Um, it sounded uniformly sterile, and it had that pointy horn used to poke me in the moob. But apart from that, yeah, great guitar.
Yeah,
I wish I'd loved it more than I actually did.
oh well.
But that does that did have a piezo system. Is that something that you've ever been interested in exploring?
I think maybe it was at the time because I probably would have also liked the Petrucci signature for that as well.
Mm.
And I've actually got a prototype Strandberg where Ola Strandberg, who started the company, built individual piezo saddles,
Oh.
which is really good. And I think that's as far as it got, and it's somewhere off camera. But then I saw videos of Strandberg from, I don't know what year it would have been, but the NAMM convention with like Tosin Abasi playing one.
Mm.
And I looked into them more and saw that Misha from Periphery was getting one, and all these kind of like real guitarists. So that kind of because I instantly thought like this is the most beautiful guitar I've ever seen, um,
Mm.
but I didn't know if it was sort of serious, because it was kind of not much information and just this hand-built thing
Mm.
from Sweden. Um, so I signed up to the wait list to get a custom Strandberg, and some time passed, and then I grew confident enough to send an email to Ola to see if I could try and skip the wait list because I had like 100 YouTube views or something like that. So I emailed him like, "Hello, I'm the greatest guitarist of all time.
Mm.
You should expedite my guitar for me, please."
It's important to start an email like that, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I'm thinking of moving that to my signature. And he replied something like, "I'm not sure I believe you, but let's Skype." And basically, it turned out that Strandberg was kind of growing a lot through that time, and they just started making production models at, I forget which factory it was, but long story short, I ended up being able to get a production model and made a few videos with it that got quite a lot of views, which I guess showed Strandberg that I wasn't totally useless, if not the greatest guitar player of all time.
One of them.
And then, we've been really good friends, I think, for the last 6 years, just about, and then turned it into a signature guitar.
Yes, indeed. Now we can only just see the top horn of that, attractive as it is. There we go. That's the whole thing. So, as I understand it, we have a gentle fan fret. Is that right? Or is...
It's I forget the numbers, but it's basically Les Paul to Strat scale. So I think there's only a half inch difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you tend to, is that for like drop D tuning that you're mostly in, or?
I'm in drop C sharp.
Right.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And as I understand it, we've got Sir pickups.
We don't.
Oh.
We have in this guitar, we have the prototypes of my signature pickups.
Go on.
Which are made by someone who's making pickups for Strandberg. I'm not sure how much of this is secret anymore because I don't gear enough to know who knows and who doesn't know. But if they get mad, then that's fine. But so Strandberg has a line of pickups made for their guitars coming out pretty soon, and then I have a signature set that's based off that, and
I see.
Lovely.
And so, were you designing it from the ground up? Was there anything? What was the process like when it came to that collaboration?
So the first set of pickups that I sort of chose to have in a guitar was a Seymour Duncan JB and Jazz set.
Classic combo.
Yeah, and I liked them until I played the Sir set, which I think's SSH Plus and SSV. And then I liked them until I played these. And then I liked these. I liked the Strandberg made ones until I got them tweaked for myself. So I guess it was kind of like built off the Seymour Duncan sound. I don't know, maybe Sir wouldn't agree that their pickups are anything like them. But to me, it was kind of like chasing the things that I liked about them while taking out stuff that I didn't like. So I've got just a three-way switch here.
Yes.
So yeah, it's bridge. I actually can't remember. It's some combination of one coil from each pickup that turns into a noise cancel. And that's sort of like the Petrucci thing. He's got the sort of jangly middle position.
And as always, just a volume knob, no tone knob for you.
Yeah, there was a tour that I did with a band called Intervals, where I was playing rhythm guitar in intervals, and that was the first tour I've ever done where I did a guitar change in the set. So I would get a 7-string guitar like halfway through and start playing it, and almost all of the time I would realize that I'd left the tone knob off. This was before I had in-ears, and I spent more of the time on stage having fun than paying attention to what I was doing. So I would eventually figure that out and then fix it. But then I realized I really never use the tone knob. If I do, it's only to kind of like make fun of jazz guitar tones in sound check. So yeah, I thought that was just like a very obvious practical decision to make for this one.
Absolutely right. I mean, that goes back to all sorts of shred super strats back in the day, doesn't it? Like
Yeah.
Kramers and Charvels and stuff with only one knob on. That's very cool. Does that have the Australian Blackwood veneer on as well?
Yep, it does. I'm sure the
Beautiful.
webcam's going to really do it justice.
It's a very attractive guitar.
I agree. I like it.
Congratulations. Now, we had hinted, I guess we've hinted at new pickups. You'd also told me that we'd be okay to talk about your new album.
Yeah.
To some degree. Before we go into detail about that, obviously you have released EPs to critical acclaim, Other Things, Sweet Nothings, End of Everything, and Sunhead. And then the album itself, Handmade Cities. Tell me, what's the difference in your mind between making an EP and making an album?
The original EPs were me giving up on making an album. So I basically...
Oh, it can't be that simple. I thought there was going to be some massive conceptual...
I mean, I
talk about
do
the
want...
media. Yeah, that'd be great, yeah.
I don't know. I think I quite strongly believe in planning as far into the future as you like to daydream, and then if you get there and something changes, to just plan a new future. So I had not much music made, and I thought, well, I guess the way to start releasing something is to make an album, because that's pretty much what people do. And
Right.
I started writing this album and kind of had written 4 songs and then was a bit stuck. And then a couple of months later, for fun, I wrote 3 songs really quickly and decided I could just release that as an EP. So that was what Other Things was.
Right.
Those 3 songs I think I wrote in like 4 days altogether. And then I went back to the album, what I thought would be the album, and decided that it could just be a second EP, and then I could make a trilogy. So those original 4 songs became Sweet Nothings, which was written before Other Things, but was meant to be an album. And then once I settled on making a trilogy, it made writing the 3rd part sort of easy. Almost like just fulfilling a contract with myself, because I said I'd do it, so I had to. And then I guess because I'd done that, I thought, okay, now it's time to actually make an album. So I made Titties.
And now we have album number 2 in the works. What can you tell me about this piece of music? Well, it's this piece of work, rather.
It's slightly longer than Handmade Cities. It's 8 tracks. I am genuinely really excited about all of it because there's a lot of crazy shit in there.
I hope so.
If it was, if the other stuff was like a 3 or 4 listen thing for you, then I think this will be maybe a 5 or 6.
Good, yeah.
But hopefully still in a way that you feel something, not just annoyance. A lot of cool guests on it. This will be maybe just before the album gets announced with all the details. But something that makes me laugh every time I think about it is there is an electric harp solo on one of the songs, which just is one of those things where, because I had the idea, it just had to happen, because I think I would be upset if it didn't. So the story of that is I had a guitar solo competition with Neural DSP, who make the guitar software. And, well, I guess it wasn't a guitar solo, just a solo competition. And my favorite entry was by this British harpist called Amy Turk.
Right.
And I was almost finished writing the longest song on the album, with a sort of open middle section where I was thinking maybe having a piano solo. But having an electroacoustic harp was just like, this is too good not to do.
Has to happen.
Yeah. And like I don't understand. I mean, 7 strings is too much for me, so I don't understand how she does it. But yeah, so that happened, and then I have a bunch of friends singing sort of like halfway between electronic music and choir style vocals with it. And so I'm putting all this together and I'm just like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, what has this music turned into? This isn't guitar rock. So there's a bunch of stuff like that with the album where I just went down rabbit holes as deeply as I could.
Well, that's the way to approach any rabbit hole, I think, is
Yeah.
get right involved.
Yeah, I think I guess there's 2 ways that I can think of to make an album. One would be to kind of like confidently walk past all the rabbit holes, and then the other one would be to stop and look at them and then be like, fuck it, and jump in. And I think I'm happy that I did, I guess, a bit of both on this.
Fantastic. Do you have a title for the record?
Not quite yet.
Okay. That's catchy.
It's a bit, yeah. Actually, I suppose it is.
Obviously, you're well known for your work with Axe Effects and a more modern approach to backline and things like that, culminating recently in the Neural DSP plugin. For guitarists that are slightly wary of this sort of approach, what can you say to reassure the population that this could very much be a creative way forward?
I think something that's fascinating with the Neural DSP stuff is a lot of my friends who I would consider old men, not just in age, but like in mindset, who would never touch a digital modeler, would sort of try it out because I guess pure software seems less threatening than a box that replaces a bigger box. And everyone I know that's tried it has been blown away. Like, oh, this sounds and feels like the real thing. And I guess they're coming out with the hardware thing in a few months, which I think will probably just be totally insane. I guess you can't really. One of the magical things about amps and people who collect guitars and everything is that there's nothing rational about it. So there's no reason to try and argue rationally that like this is better or this is better. It's just a matter of what you have fun doing. But I think for anyone that wants to have their guitar sound good for the least effort possible, it does it, and it does it really well.
Absolutely. I'd like to get you to play a little bit now, Plini. Is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, none of the new stuff I know how to play because it was either like improvised things that I have to go back and learn, or it's just stitched together little pieces. Let me think. What would you like to hear?
I mean, I'd like to hear whatever you're willing to play. I was particularly thrilled to see Rick Beato feature Electric Sunrise as the very first instrumental piece that made his "What Makes This Song Great" series. I thought that was very exciting. You must have too, I imagine.
Yeah, that was really cool. And since then I've met him as well, and he's like the sweetest human being on earth. And knows everything there is to know about music. I guess something that I could do that wouldn't stress me out too much in terms of playing is kind of explain the process behind that song.
Yes, please. That would be fantastic.
So a lot of ideas that I have come from finding really simple things on the guitar that sound pretty. So for that one, it was that chord, which is, and then the even easier version where you take a finger off. And so that was, this reverb's probably a little bit obnoxious.
It's slightly shorter.
So with that, that kind of became the foundation for the whole thing. The strumming pattern, I didn't originally know what time signature it was, but after I recorded it, learnt that it was in 13. And so anytime something like this happens, I think, well, if I've come across something that's in 13, I should probably exploit the 13 as much as I can. So that whole song's in 13, and then there's some bits that are in 4/4 as well. And because the chords were so pretty, I figured I would use them throughout most of the song. So I guess what's happening is basically a reverb still too luscious.
It's almost too luscious, yeah.
I guess the simple way of looking at it is it's just so almost all the riffs that happen in the song are just variations of this like D and E sort of thing. The big chords that come in. So I'm kind of jumping around idea-wise, but the song starts off pretty, and then I use this from Dream Theater all the time, is that if you have something that sounds pretty, the best thing to do is like crush it. Section. So this thing straight up is so big distorted chords, but still the same chords. And then there's a riff, which is the same thing as the chords, but just played more aggressively and palm muted.
Is there some sort of auto wah going on under there? So I'm hearing like filter or something.
What was that? Sorry.
I thought in the album recording I heard a filter. Maybe it was on the bass, some sort of wow 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 thing going on there.
Yeah.
Or did I make it up?
Anymore.
No, it could have been.
Yeah. So stuff like that is like I'll have recorded this palm muted guitar, and then I'll just start scrolling through different synths and adding different things. And that's where it kind of starts leaving where the idea started and turning into something else that's based on it but doesn't really exist anymore. And then I forget how I came up with it exactly, but there's this. Tapping thing over the top.
Beautiful.
And again, like that is all the same frets. It's not really difficult to do. Like one of the things I love about the guitar is the relationship of almost all the strings works so that if you play pick 3 frets and play those notes on all the strings, it's generally going to sound relatively interesting. So I like to use that totally to my advantage for like chords. Like the less work I have to do to sound pretty, the better. So that's where that tapping thing comes from, is almost like a geometrical pattern crammed into the 13/8. And the song sort of just develops like that process of taking bits of one idea to turn it into a different type of idea, maybe based on a tone or based on something that a band I like does, and then arranged into more or less a pop song structure, sort of, where it's kind of like a couple of main things going back and forth with the guitar solo in the middle. But I guess in this case, the middle is most of the song.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you very much for that. That was beautiful. One final thing I'd like to discuss. Back in the day of the fire-breathing back of the head on the back of the heels Guitar Hero, it was the solo. That was kind of all that mattered. Now, We have people that are thinking, like yourself, more in terms of a deeper compositional aspect. I'm hearing far more riffs and refrains and ideas than some sort of 15-minute exercise in self-love. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some sort of self-love bedroom musician joke to make. Exactly what. But I think because I came from listening to all that and realized that isn't much I could do to expand on it, I had to look into other areas to try and figure out like what it is that I could create that would be interesting to me. So that's where sort of the more um, songwriting oriented stuff comes from. I guess something you'll hear on the new album as well is it might be a guitar album, but it's kind of almost equally a drum album. The start of the first song, which is going to be the first single, is basically a drum solo. So it's stuff like that, like bringing in really awesome musicians, and even though none of us are really in the same room when we record it, but having it sound like it's a bunch of musicians in a circle rather than guitarists out the front and some anonymous session people behind. Like, I like this idea that everyone's doing something interesting all the time. So I try to write like that as well. But there's still guitar solos in there too, because you can't not.
Well,